circle of rat back and I'm going and leaving tracks in morning. And I don't give a crap whether you streaming, you torrent this. You can try to contest, but you'll be needing an army. Beat them in Normandy, current rappers eat to the warning stone.
That trash. And I thought about replying, but you can't argue with stupid, okay? You just both look stupid. The reason I support trans kids, trans grown-ups, gay, straight, lesbians, whoever, is because I know when I was growing up, I didn't fit in anywhere. But it was because of the clothes I wore, what my hair looked like, the music I listened to. Those are all things I could rectify. I could cut my hair, I could listen to jazz, I don't know what. But to be somebody who's gay, lesbian, especially trans, I don't know what it feels like to be trapped in a body that I don't feel I belong in. That is why I support that.
All right, so that's your boy Phil Brooks supporting trans and the kids. Now, I'm not going to be as venomous as my friend Millennial Spark. I'm not going to go after CM Punk. I just want to ask some very pertinent questions. One of the things that we have in the subject of trans children is that we've seen an explosion of trans kids in recent years. I think I saw a study that says that now 7% of youth consider themselves to be LGBTQ or whatever that means. And yet, and when asked why, some people will try to avoid the cultural aspect of it in terms of it being pushed in schools and through comic books and video games, etc. They'll try to avoid that by saying, it's just increased acceptance. That if you increase acceptance, people will come out. They'll bloom like roses. But then you go to like the Trevor Project, which is about LGBTQ youth, and you'll still see that there have about 45% of transgenders have attempted suicide. You'll see that they still have high levels of homelessness. And you will say to yourself, how are people who feel more comfortable coming out also much higher than normal rates of suicide? I mean, you would think you would keep that to yourself if you were, but how can those two things be true at the same time? They can't really be true at the same time. So, of course, there is a cultural push to accept people as they are, which is on its face a good idea. So in that regard, I don't have any venom towards somebody who says, hey, people should be who they want to be. Again, my question is, what part do you ask me to play in that situation? If my part is to stand aside and let people do whatever it is they want to do, then I guess that's fine because I don't have a choice in the matter. If you're asking me to lend my voice to these issues, my answer is no. I don't support trans and the kids. Why? Well, because as a person who worked in a mental health issue, if somebody comes into an office, and which happened recently, a guy came in, he had a gigantic scar up his left bicep and another one near his right wrist. It looks like he had cut himself with something jagged. That was reason enough to send him to the hospital. You talk to him and he's like, well, mounting pressures, 5 kids, sick parents, this kind of the stereotypical situation. This guy who just cracked. He just didn't know what else to do. He just started carving himself. You put that guy in the hospital. Okay. Somebody comes in, they got a bunch of old scars on their forearm. Like they just took on a razor blade and carved it into their own skin. And you say, what's up with that? And they give you the story about how they can't really control it. And then if you get them in the hospital, they'll find little things to do this with. They'll find screws, like a loose screw, and they'll scratch their own arms with it. I learned in the hospital that they'll take a plastic comb. They'll take the teeth off the comb and do it. It's a compulsion. They can't stop themselves from harming themselves. And you put that person in the hospital and you put them on medications. You don't just let them do it because, well, it makes them feel better. Because for quite a few people, it does make them feel better. That's why they do it. So you talk to somebody who has, they call, let's call it responding to internal stimuli. There's a voice in their mind that's telling them to hurt themselves. You know, it's not necessarily that they want to hurt themselves, but it's a voice in their mind that's telling them that they should hurt themselves for whatever reason. And we put that person in the hospital and we put them on medications. But if it's a trans person who has a, you know, whatever, a voice in their mind or whatever, telling them that the body that they exist in is inappropriate or it's wrong, as long as they pass that cutting up process on to somebody else, it's A-okay. That needs to be explained to me. It needs to be explained to me how somebody who has perfectly healthy body parts, it's perfectly fine for us to say, if you start cutting yourself, we're going to put you in the hospital. But if you go to a doctor and you let that doctor cut you up, well, that's just perfectly fine. That's normal behavior, because it's not. We knew way back in the day when we started seeing people get plastic surgery and they became addicted to plastic surgery, that plastic surgery was a problem. We knew it then. This was 30 years ago, before it was even a quote unquote trans issue. This is back when people continuously got nose jobs. People kept restructuring their face and their jaw and everything until they started looking completely and totally monstrous. We talked about all sorts of individuals who went through that. Not just boob jobs. I'm talking like complete reconstruction of their face. And we said, this ain't healthy for society, for a doctor to just say, well, this is what they want to do with their face, so we're going to do it. Even when it comes to something as simple as tattoos, and people get tattoos all up their arm and all over their neck and all over their face, and people say, look, that's not normal behavior. You know, we ought to take some time to think about this. And we, due to beliefs in individual freedoms, if you want to get a tattoo on your face, you get a tattoo on your face. It is what it is. But we don't ask the question of, do these people have concerns? Like, do these people have something against their own body? Now, it's another long stereotype that a lot of LGBT youth, people who identify as gay or whatever, that they have a history of not feeling comfortable in their own bodies because they were violated in some way. They were molested. Some of them were raped or whatever. And I saw an article that stated for some women, tattooing is a way of owning their bodies after they were sexually assaulted or whatever. So the body that they saw before they were sexually assaulted, you know, is different from the body that they see now. And that helps them mentally. And that's very bizarre. And I see how that would be. But it also connects doing things to your body because it helps your mental health. And you could say, well, Mongo, that's a good thing. If tattoos make people feel better, then what's the problem? Well, you're outsourcing because tattoos do cause a sensation, and people can become addicted to that sensation, which is why people get ridiculous tattoos. You can ask the question of, is it an addiction? Is it outsourcing self-harming? Is it almost the exact same thing as what the trans youth are trying to do? Now, do I believe in transgenderism? I do not. I do not subscribe to you can go from boy to girl, from girl to boy. That's nonsense. I don't believe that transgenderism is a floating signifier that we can just call a magazine boy because, well, we can culturally define what a boy is. It's like, look, you biologically have an innie or an outie. All right. It's one or the other. Those are the only two things that exist. There's a boundary, a naturally set boundary that either you have an innie or you have an outie. If you have an outie, we call you a boy until you come mature, then you call you a man. If you have an any, we call you a girl, and to which you become an adult, to which we call you a woman. And that's it. Now, if you want to you want to say, hey, a surgeon can make me a woman. Well, look, it's more to it than innies and outies. That's when you start saying, well, there's all types of secondary sexual things like hips, like mannerisms, like your chromosomes, like, all these other things that go into it. It's not as simple as innies and outies, but innies and outies is 99% accurate when it comes to whether somebody's a male or a female. Now, if you have an innie and you feel like you should have an outie, that's unfortunate, but you're not a man, okay? You're not. Because it takes more than just having an outie that can make you a man, all right? Because generally speaking, once you grow an outie, you've already done the other parts in which is going to make you a man. You've already had the social experience of being a man. Or a boy. You've grown up in a certain way. You've undergone puberty a certain way. You've participated in certain sports. You've been socialized a certain way. And I know that part is part of the thing that we're fighting here, is that, well, why should we socialize children into boys and girls? And why should we do all of this? You have to understand, a society that has no responsibilities on especially boys and girls literally doesn't have any purpose. And this is one of the things that I've really kind of I agree with a lot of my hoteps and a lot of the really traditional masculine individuals, where they say the fact that we don't have any type of initiation rituals for boys and girls has led people to be confused about what they should be doing in society. Because manhood and womanhood, they have been traditionally things that have been passed down by the parents. And it's been something where it came with expectations. Like, I've studied a lot of Africa, for instance. Teenage girl, as soon as she starts having her first period, the women, including her mother, her grandmother, etc., they take her away. They take her into some kind of hut that they built outside of the village, and they teach her about her womanhood. They teach her how to handle menstruation. They tell her about sex and how babies are born and what is expected of her as a woman in society. When you're a boy and you start going through puberty, you get your growth spurt. Maybe you start getting chest hair or whatever the case may be. Your balls drop. Your father, uncles, etc. take you, and they take you out somewhere, and they start teaching you what it means to be a man in your society. But then when it comes to our Western society, where there is no initiation ritual and we just expect you to grow up, it's like, okay, well, you grew up, and now we've got people who are completely disillusioned about what it means to be a boy or a girl, and what it means to be a man or a woman. And it's not just the trans issue. That's just the issue that we are talking about today. But we can also talk about gang violence in the black community, where a lot of those boys are trained to think that's what manhood is. And because their initiation rituals came via gangbangers. If you're a real man, you should be able to go up and take whatever you want. If you're a real man, you would have sex with this woman, even though she might be disgusting and ugly and a prostitute, who's had sex with everybody in the neighborhood or whatever for drugs. That's what you were expected to do. And there's all kinds of negative behaviors that come with that. Being oversexed, which you see a lot in rappers. A lot of them are constantly sex preoccupied. A lot of them are personally destructive in terms of drug use. They are completely and totally attached to material possessions, big chains, big watches, gold teeth, that kind of thing. They are completely and always insecure about who they are and always feeling the need to prove themselves. This is a big thing when it comes to rap music, and it's a big thing. It's a macho culture when it comes to blacks and Latinos especially. And you look at all those negative behaviors and you say, look, it's not healthy what they're doing, right? It doesn't matter if they're heterosexual or not. What they're doing is not healthy. So we understand that in a society, if you just allow children to grow up unraised, you're going to get gangbangers, but you're also going to get this kind of stuff too. And that is the people who say to themselves, well, I don't want to be a hyper masculine gangbanger thug archetype. I want to be an artsy guy. You know, I want to live life outside of the boundaries of my neighborhood, which is all good. Because most of the time people who grow up in the hood are negatively socialized. I want to live outside of that. And therefore, they go off and they go into college and they start trying different things and dressing different ways and listening to different kinds of music. And all of a sudden, they decided, I'm a girl. Because I like all these girly, feminine things. I like art. I like flowers. I like painting my fingernails. And I want to wear a dress, you know. And you say to yourself, this is part of the process of just growing up. But it also happened because there was no expectations on him for what he should be. So part of society, and guess what? You do need expectations for men and women, because how can you have a society in which everybody is like, it's like being a gardener, right? If you plant corn and a weed grows, the weeds are going to feed off of your corn, which means that it could affect your harvest. So you go in there and you kill the weeds, you pull the weeds out. A society is exactly the same way. You are a father, you have children. You're trying to grow your children to be the best thing that they could possibly be. Well, there's going to be weeds there. And those weeds are typically somebody else's children who are negatively influencing or affecting your children. You then have to go into that society and say, son, daughter, being friends with these city girls and all of these city boys is probably not good for your development. You move them along. You say to them, this is what society is needing from you. This is what we expect from you. Not just me as your father, but your society. This is what we expect from you. And then at that point, you reorient your child as a person who is going to be beneficial to society. They're still going to be individual because they're still going to do whatever they want. But at least you had some type of expectation on them. In a society where there's no more fathers in the home, there's nobody really orienting the child towards a goal or a mission or anything. And it's not a surprise to me that you see Kenny Omega, who is 40 years old with no children, supporting trans youth, quote unquote, and CM Punk, who's 40 years old with no children, supporting the trans youth or whatever. It's not a surprise to me because it's not their responsibility to raise a child in a society that is trying to leech itself onto them for whatever reason. And it's not just negative influences in terms of gangs or the LGBT groups in the school, but it's also cult behaviors. You know, there's various cults that exist out there, from communists to the Nation of Islam to various political cults. As a parent, you're supposed to teach your children how to understand the world around them. And part of that is realizing that a reality exists, that there's some element of fantasy in building your personality. There's some element of how you see yourself versus how everybody else sees you in your personality. But what is real is real. If you stub your toe, that pain is real. If I see you cutting up your arms, that is real. If you visually say, or if you vocally say that you would like to do harm to yourself, that is real. If you say you are unhappy with your body and you feel like it needs to change, that is real. The damage that you do to yourself is real. It has real consequences. And so is it really a surprise? And if you look at the LGBT youth, high rates of suicide, high rates of suicidal ideation, high rates of homelessness, all the same things could be said for people who have other mental illnesses. People who have schizophrenia have very high rates of suicide. They hear voices, they see things. Voices may tell them to hurt themselves. They may want to end the voices. And so they'll self-medicate. A lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. That's self-harming behavior, by the way. Bipolar disorder. You'll see a lot of those people. Schizophrenics also end up in jail quite often. Last time I checked, which was probably a decade ago, a lot of people in prisons and jails suffer from depression. Now, is the jail the cause of the depression? Nobody knows. At least I didn't see that. But you see a lot of high rates of people depressed, especially men, committing suicide. And a lot of it is cultural pressures. You know, they lost their children, they got divorced. Loneliness is a big issue with men today. There's a lot of social issues that we have to deal with. And a lot of it comes from our inability to have responsible people step in and say, you don't need to do damage to yourself. Now, there's some things, again, where there's not much you can do. But that's why therapy exists. We have therapy so we can sit down and talk to people and try to orient them correctly, you know, because your dad is not going to be your therapist. He doesn't really understand. Again, he's going to communicate his beliefs onto you and, you know, the way that he grew up. So if you grew up in the church, he may say, you know, pray on it or whatever, and you need something a little bit stronger than prayer. All right. You might need something like a pill, or you might need to sleep, which some people have problems sleeping, or they do drugs or whatever. So you might have these issues. And for me, the trans kid issue is becoming a highly, highly cultural issue in which you can't just accept it. Does that mean that there aren't people with body dysmorphia that definitely hate themselves, hate their bodies, hate the way that they look? It's like, yes, but that, of course, is a spectrum. There's bodybuilders who have body dysmorphia, and they think if they eat a cheeseburger, they're going to get fat. So they continuously work out and they take steroids, which is self-harming behavior, and it's to the extreme. It could go the other way where you could be concerned about your weight. This is typically women. They'll become anorexic. Self-harming behavior. You're eating, then you're vomiting. None of this stuff is healthy. There needs to be some type of orientation towards a healthy sense of self and healthy criticism of self. But a lot of that becomes from cultural or mental issues. A lot of people who become bodybuilders, they used to get picked on, they used to get bullied, and they're like, if I become big and strong and muscular, nobody will bully me ever again. So they do that. Some girl probably has issues about her beauty. She doesn't think that she's beautiful enough for the guy that she wants. Maybe he's into slender girls, and so she wants to be skinnier so that she can attract the man that she wants. So she's throwing up and all this kind of stuff. Or maybe she just doesn't like what she looks in, like what she sees when she looks in the mirror. All of this stuff needs to be taken into account. Now, I know that it's typical for us to just want to rage against rainbows and yell at the pride flag and all that stuff. For me, that's not helping anybody. You know, if you really want to combat this issue, what you do is you get these people in front of somebody and you say, why do you feel this way? Okay. Not just, do we gender affirm? No, we don't. We don't affirm the voices that people hear. We confirm that they hear the voices. We don't affirm that, oh yeah, life is stressful, man. Sometimes you just got to kill yourself. No, that's not what we do. We don't just affirm the negative thing onto people and say, oh, you are depressed. Well, you have a right to be depressed. I mean, you just want to lay in bed all day and stink and let your hair get matted and all this kind of stuff. Great. That's work. That you're not hurting anybody. It's like, but they're harming themselves. It's self-harm. harming behavior. It's a problem. You know, not being able to take care of yourself is a concern. And the trans children, I feel, is that similar type of concern. Where does it hurt me that this trans child wants to carve their body up? No. No, it doesn't. But it is a problem that this person feels a need that they need to carve their body up. Why is that? And then it's a bigger problem for me that we're going to proselytize to people that this is okay, that this is the right thing to do, and this is healthcare and all this kind of crap. Because it's like, is a nose job healthcare? Is it really? Is when they start making designer babies, is that going to be healthcare? It may be cloaked in healthcare because, oh my goodness, we can help children get rid of like what's something, cerebral palsy or something like that, when really they're just going in there changing their kids' eye color because they can. I'm talking 20, 30 years into the future, all right? Because it's all going to be cosmetic surgery in the end. How can we say that I'm kind of confused about it. How can you say you accept people as they are if that person does not accept how they are? It's just an open blanket acceptance without any criticism, it really doesn't mean anything. You're not helping them, which is why the suicide rate is still so high. Because no matter how many public times you can come out and say, I support trans youth. There's no matter how many cartoons you make, no matter how many comic books you take and make trans, or movies you take and make trans, or whatever, it's not helping. Why not? Because it ain't a cultural issue. It's a cultural issue in so much as it being oppressed upon other people. But it's a personal issue. That personal person is not a what I call a placard for your individual agenda or how you want to prove that you're better than everybody else. That person is a person. They're going through issues. They need individual attention. Okay, that's why they tried to get rid of what they called it. What did they call it? What kind of therapy did they call it? Shit. Anyway, they try to ban the therapies because they know that if you go to therapy, you'll probably get talked out of, surgeries and taking hormones and the rest of that stuff because it's not that serious. And most people, if you actually talk to them, it isn't that serious. The people who are throwing absolute meltdowns about he, they, she, they pronouns and all that kind of crap, that's a power game. Most people who are having these problems, and I've met quite a few of them, this idea that you call him he or she or whatever, they usually don't have a meltdown over that. But the activists do, and the activists are a really big problem. And that's what I mean by the cultural aspect of it, is that they have created these wonderful, everything is great over here groups. And then somebody joins it and they become, I'm an ally. And then it becomes, I'm non-binary. And then it becomes this and it becomes that. And it's never enough. And that's, you're trapped in just supporting anything. And so when you have groups like Gays Against Groomers, and they come out and they say, well, we're gay people and we don't support, the sexualization of children, like the books that are being put into the schools and all this stuff that's aimed at children that have pride flags in them, like across the Spider-Verse and all this kind of stuff with the bisexual lighting and all this sorts of stuff. We don't support that, But then you'll talk to the activists and they'll say, oh, well, the children support it. Oh, yes, it's a big thing amongst the kids. And it's like, well, because you implanted that into their brain. Most kids will not be thinking about that stuff. But if you go into school every day and it's pride flags all over the place and there's, drag queens in there and they're trying to make school sound or being gay or pride or whatever to be seen like it's the most fun thing in the world. It's the most fun. It's the most accepting. It's literally a cult. And it's because we don't orient our children that people like CM Punk can come out and say, well, I know what it's like to be an outcast. It's like everybody's an outcast at some point because you're an individual. An individual is always an outcast. Even if you feel like you should fit in somewhere, 9 times out of 10, you don't. That doesn't mean that you just accept everything that floats around in the world. That literally doesn't make sense. But it makes sense to him, and I don't know why. But it makes sense to him, I think, because he's a man without children, and he's probably a man who doesn't want children. As a man who does and does not have children currently myself, I don't want to raise children in a world that has no expectations for men and boys, that have no concept of what boys and girls are. That sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. Why would you want to raise your children in a society where the society is the one who dictates these ideas, and they jumble them all together and nothing makes sense, nothing matters, there's no boundaries, there's no expectations, there's nothing. Just go out and be wild and free. If you become a gangbanger, that's okay. If you become a tranny, that's fine too. If you become a rapist, well, an accused rapist, that's bad. You could be an accused rapist, that's terrible. If you're an actual rapist, well, it depends. Because we know that, there are certain people who they can get away with rape. There's certain people, it's okay if they're a rapist. Or that is the least interesting thing about it. If they're a trans rapist, or they're a rapist of in Europe, or if you're a Muslim rapist, we're going to kind of, downplay that part. So to me, that's what this whole thing is about in terms of the trans youth. It's bullshit. We know that. And ranting and raving against it doesn't do us any good. So let's just have a conversation about it. What is our society going to do once the left wins? Let's just say that they win. The progressives destroy the concept of male and female and man and woman, and everybody can just willy-nilly go and get surgeries. And people are not having children because, taking cross-sex hormones is going to affect your ability to get pregnant. It's also going to affect your ability to impregnate somebody. Cutting off your penis and removing your uterus is going to affect your ability to reproduce. But let's just say we support the youth and we're going to let them do it. What is society going to look like in 50 years? Are we all going to be cyborgs by that point in time? Or are our children going to be born in tubes? We're going to start harvesting the eggs of underage girls before we take out their uterus. We're going to take their eggs out first and put them in a machine so that we can replicate humans. And we're just going to be able to match up her egg with some kid's sperm and just, before we cut his balls off, we're going to, match it up. And so we can create more children, and then we can give them away to all of our non-binary, non-families. Everybody has a generic partner and nobody has a husband or a wife. Does that sound like a reality that you support? I don't think so.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.